Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
It is good to be here.
We are two Protestant Christians holding firmly to the Westminster Confession of Faith, and today we are looking to open up the scriptures and see what is really there.
Yeah.
We are not interested in skimming the surface. We want to get to the bottom of the text.
That is always the goal. And for this deep dive, we have a massive task in front of us. We're conducting a comprehensive analysis of Psalm 78.
A long one.
A very long one. And we're doing it with the aid of the Treasury of David by Charles Spurgeon.
The Prince of Preachers. You know, I have always appreciated how Spurgeon can take a verse that looks strictly historical, something that, seems like just dry facts.
Right.
And he shows you that it's actually about you right now, today.
That is the genius of this particular psalm. It's entitled A Mashil of Asaph. And that word mashil is pretty significant.
What does it mean?
It means it's an instructive psalm. It's not just a song to be sung, it's a lesson to be learned.
Okay, so right from the title, we're being told to sit up and pay attention.
Exactly. And at first glance, if you just read it quickly, it does look a bit like a history textbook. I mean, it recounts the plagues in Egypt, the wilderness wanderings, the time of the judges.
All the greatest hits of the Old Testament.
Pretty much. But Spurgeon points out something fascinating right at the start. Verse 2 calls this whole history a parable.
Right. I will open my mouth in a parable. Now that's strange.
It is, because usually when we think of parables, we think of the stories Jesus told, like the prodigal son. Fictional narratives that illustrate a truth.
Sure, something that didn't literally happen, but teaches a lesson.
But here, Asaph is saying that actual history, the literal facts of what happened to Israel, is intended to be viewed as a parable. It sets forth the conduct of believers and the character of God in all ages.
So history is a mirror.
That's a great way to put it. The mission of this discussion, then, is to examine that history, not just to memorize dates or geography, but to see the cycle.
The cycle of...
The cycle of divine grace in human rebellion. It's a pattern that repeats over and over. And it's a cycle that culminates in a very specific sovereign choice, the election of David.
Okay, let's unpack this. The psalm opens with a call to attention. Verse 1 says, "Give ear, O my people, to my law." It feels like a school teacher clapping their hands to quiet the room.
It really does. It's a demand for focus. Spurgeon notes that if God gives his truth a tongue, the least we can do is give him our ears. We are, by nature, distracted creatures.
That's for sure.
And notice the language in verse 2 referring to dark sayings of old.
That sounds a bit mysterious. Dark sayings, what's that about?
It refers to enigmas or riddles. Spurgeon uses a beautiful analogy here. He says the letter of the song is precious, but the inner sense is the pearl beneath the gushing flood.
We have to dive for it.
We have to dive for it. And it's not a coincidence that Matthew 13 quotes this very psalm to show that historical narratives contain hidden spiritual meanings.
So, the dark saying isn't that it's obscure or scary, but that there's a depth of meaning that isn't obvious on the surface. You have to look for the spiritual parallel.
You do. And once you find that pearl, what do you do with it?
You don't hide it.
You pass it on. And that's the first major theme of the psalm, the obligation of tradition. Verse 3 says, "Which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us."
There's a golden chain of transmission here. It's not just, I learned this. It's, my dad told me, and his dad told him, and now I'm telling you.
Spurgeon actually identifies 4 generations in these opening verses.
4?
Yeah. The fathers, then their children, then the generation to come, and then their children.
So it's a very long view of faithfulness. We're not just thinking about the next 5 years. We're thinking about the next century.
That's the idea. And what are they supposed to be teaching?
It's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, right?
No. Spurgeon puts it quite bluntly. He says grammar is poor food for the soul if it's not flavored with grace. They aren't just teaching secular history. They are teaching the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works.
The why behind the what.
The why and the who.
I found a story in the source material that really brought this home for me. It mentioned the children of Marindal.
Ah, yes. This is a striking historical footnote. Tell us about that.
Well, during a time of persecution, there was this Bishop of Cavilon who was interrogating these children, trying to trap them in their words.
So he's trying to get them to renounce their faith.
Right. And these children, these kids, answered him with such clarity and scriptural accuracy that a bystander, some adult in the room, said he had learned more from those children than he ever did from the disputations of the doctors in the Sorbonne.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And it shows that religious breeding, if we can use that old term, it strengthens children against error.
If you teach them the why and the who of their faith, they can stand up to anything.
The Jewish custom of the Passover is the model here. On Passover night, the child asks, "Why do we eat bitter herbs? Why this night different?"
And the father doesn't just say, "Because I said so."
No. He tells the story of the bondage in Egypt. He explains the theology through the history. That's the model for parental instruction.
So the purpose of all this history teaching isn't just so the kids can pass a test on ancient Israel. Verse 7 gives the reason.
And what's the reason?
That they might set their hope in God.
There it is. It's doxological. It's about hope. But there's a flip side to that coin.
The negative example. That they might not be as their fathers.
A stubborn and rebellious generation.
You know, this is a crucial theological point Spurgeon makes. He says grace cures bad memories.
How so?
The text links forgetting God's works directly with failing to keep his commandments. It's a cause and effect.
I see. So when verse 8 talks about a generation that was stubborn and rebellious, it's not just calling them names. It defines them. It's that they were a generation that set not their heart aright.
It's a heart issue.
It always is. Spurgeon calls it a spirit that was not steadfast. They were constant only in their inconstancy.
Which leads us right into one of the most puzzling parts of the psalm, at least for me. Segment 2, the mystery of Ephraim.
Verse 9.
The children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle.
It's a very specific indictment, isn't it? Why Ephraim?
Well, at that time, Ephraim was the big dog on the block, right? The tabernacle was at Shiloh, which was in their territory. Joshua himself was an Ephraimite.
They were the leading tribe. They were supposed to set the example. And notice the description, armed and carrying bows.
They were well equipped. They had the technology, the training, the status. But when the battle came, they turned back.
It's like a football team with the best stadium, the most expensive gear, the highest paid players, and they just forfeit the moment the other team shows up on the field.
That's a fair analogy. So what's the theological application Spurgeon draws from this?
He says that external advantages do not guarantee victory. You can have the best arguments, the best heritage, the best armor of theology, but unregenerate man, or even a believer acting in the flesh, remains a coward without loyal faith.
So having the bow isn't enough if you don't have the heart. The weapon is useless if the warrior is a coward.
Correct. Spurgeon speculates this might refer to a specific event, maybe a slaughter by the men of Gath mentioned in 1 Chronicles, or maybe it just refers to their general failure to conquer Canaan.
But either way, the root cause is clear in verse 10.
They kept not the covenant of God.
And what else? Verse 11. And forget his works and his wonders that he had showed them.
There it is again, forgetting. Spurgeon uses a striking phrase there. He says the memory of mercies was written upon water.
Oof. Written upon water, gone as soon as it happens. No lasting impression at all.
None. And this forgetting is linked to a metaphor that appears later in the psalm, but conceptually, it belongs right here.
You're talking about the deceitful bow.
Exactly. We'll get to that later, but just keep that image in your mind.
A
bow that looks good but shoots crooked.
Okay. Now, to show just how inexcusable this forgetfulness was, the psalmist takes us on a trip down memory lane.
He takes us back to the scene of the miracles, segment 3. Marvels in the field of Zon.
Where is Zon?
Zon, or Tanis, was the royal capital of the pharaohs. This is key. These miracles weren't done in a corner somewhere. They happened in the open day, in the sight of their enemies.
And what miracles? Verse 13, he divided the sea. Spurgeon notes that the source material describes the water standing as a heap.
The liquid element was solidified. It formed crystal walls on either side. Can you even imagine the visual of that?
Yeah.
Walking on dry ground with walls of water towering over you.
It's unbelievable. And then the guidance, the cloud and the fire.
Spurgeon breaks this down so beautifully. In the daytime, in the desert, the sun is your enemy. It's brutal. The cloud was a sunscreen. It shielded them.
A portable divine umbrella.
Exactly. But at night, when the desert is freezing cold and pitch dark, it became a light of fire to solace their sorrows and guide their way.
So it's the perfect provision. Shade when you're hot, light and warmth when you're cold.
It represents the presence of God.
Here.
He adapts his grace to our immediate specific need. It's not a one-size-fits-all grace.
And then if that wasn't enough, water from the rock. Verses 15 and 16. And it wasn't just a trickle, was it?
No, look at the language. Great depths, rivers, overflowed. It was a torrent, a gushing flood of fresh water in the middle of a barren wasteland.
The theological point being what?
That God's grace is commensurate with his power. He doesn't just give enough to survive. He provides streams in the desert. He provides abundance.
So you have this picture, crystal walls of water, a pillar of fire guiding you, rivers gushing out of rocks. You would think, okay, these people are set. They will never, ever doubt again.
And you would be wrong. Which brings us to the tragedy of segment 4, provocation in the wilderness.
Verse 17, it's a heavy verse. They sinned yet more against him.
Sinned yet more.
After all that.
Spurgeon argues that mercy abused leads to greater sin. If God hadn't been so good to them, their rebellion wouldn't have been so heinous. But because he gave them so much, their sin was a deeper, more profound betrayal.
Verse 18 says they tempted God in their heart. Now, we know from James that God cannot be tempted to do evil, so what does this mean? How do you tempt God?
It means they challenged him. They were trying to force God to alter his will to suit their lusts. It's the attitude that says, if you are really God, you will do what I want when I want it the way I want it.
It's putting God to the test based on your own desires.
It's an act of supreme arrogance. And then they slander him. Verse 19 asks the infamous question, can God furnish a table in the wilderness?
The audacity of that question is just staggering.
Notice the logic, or the lack of it. They admit he gave them water. Verse 20 says, behold, he smote the rock that the waters gushed out. They knew he could do that. They saw it with their own eyes.
Right, they grant him that one.
But then they ask, can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people?
It is so completely irrational. It's like saying, okay, you can build a skyscraper, but can you stack 2 blocks on top of each other? That's probably too hard for you.
It is irrational, but it's also malicious. From a Reformed perspective, this shows that unbelief is a slander against God's character. It questions his power, yes, but even more, it questions his goodness.
It implies he's holding out on them.
Yes, that he's able perhaps, but not willing. It's a direct assault on his love.
So God answers them, but not in the way they might hope. First, he sends them manna.
Right, and look at how it's described. Opened the doors of heaven.
Corn of heaven, angels' food.
I love the detail in the source about angels' food. It's not that angels actually sit around and eat manna.
They don't have bodies.
No, angels are spirits. But Spurgeon says it's called angels' food because it was made by their ministry. They were the chefs, so to speak. And it was of such excellence that if angels did eat, this is what they would choose. It was perfect.
So they were eating heavenly food, but they still had earthly, unbelieving hearts.
And they weren't satisfied. They wanted meat. They wanted the flesh pots of Egypt, the taste of their slavery. So God gives them the quails.
Verse 26, God is the Lord paramount of the winds. He uses an east wind and a south wind to bring them in.
And the quantity is absurd. Flesh as dust and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. It's an overwhelming amount of meat. Verse 29 says they were well filled.
And here's the terrifying part. Verse 29 also says, he gave them their own desire.
That is one of the scariest phrases in all of Scripture.
It is. Spurgeon says, better be God's dog than the devil's darling. Sometimes getting exactly what you want is a judgment. God gave them what they screamed for.
But he sent leanness to their souls. A great quote from the source says that sometimes prosperity is a judgment.
And the punishment was swift. It was immediate. While their meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them.
It's a chilling warning about the danger of gratified passions. They were not estranged from their lust. They were in the very act of gorging themselves. And in that moment of gluttony, judgment fell.
You would think that would finally wake them up. I mean, people literally dropping dead with food in their mouths.
You would think. But that brings us to segment 5 and the cycle of hypocrisy. Verse 32. For all this, they sinned still.
It's almost unbelievable.
Even miracles of judgment did not produce faith. Spurgeon has a vivid image for this. He says, if you beat a tiger with many strikes, you cannot turn him into a sheep.
Punishment might scare you, but it doesn't change your nature.
It doesn't regenerate the heart.
Yes.
Correct. Verse 33 says, their days were consumed in vanity and their years in trouble. Life without faith is just a weary, pointless march to nowhere.
But wait a minute, verse 34 says, when he slew them, then they sought him.
That sounds like repentance, doesn't it?
It sounds like it, but look closer. It's what we might call foxhole religion today. They were scared. They returned and inquired early, but the very next verses expose it.
Verse 36.
Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongues.
So they were trying to con God to say the right words to get him off their back. They were trying to buy him off with lip service. Spurgeon calls the heart a chameleon or weathercock. It changes color with the situation, it turns with the wind. The root issue is in verse 37. For their heart was not right with him.
And this is the shocking part of the song, the part that makes you stop and reread verse 38. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and destroyed them not.
This is the mystery of divine mercy. It's completely unscandalized by their hypocrisy. He sees right through it, and yet he forgives. He atones for them. He covers their sin.
And the reason given isn't their goodness or their potential.
Not at all. It's his own character and his knowledge of their frailty. He remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passeth away and cometh not again.
He looked at them and basically said, they're just dust, they're just a breeze. And because of that, he held back his anger.
He didn't stir up all his wrath. Spurgeon points out that if he had, they would have been consumed in an instant.
But they didn't appreciate it. They took this incredible compassion for granted. And that brings us to segment 6, and a concept that I think is one of the most striking in the whole text. Limiting the Holy One.
Verse 41. Yeah, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel.
This is the great sin, but how? How can a finite man limit the infinite God? That's the question. How do you limit something that has no limit?
You can't, objectively.
Yeah.
But you do it in your own mind and in your own experience. Spurgeon explains that we limit God by doubting his power, or by dictating his methods.
Explain that. Dictating his methods.
It's when we say, God, I need you to solve this problem, but you have to do it this way, the way I've planned out. We draw a boundary line around what we think he can or should do.
So it's like saying, God can help me with my job, but he can't possibly fix my marriage. Or God can forgive that sin, but not this one. This one's too big.
Precisely. To chalk out a path for God is arrogant impiety. Unbelief sets a horizon on the Almighty. It says to the creator of the universe, thus far you can go and no further.
And the cause of this limitation is, once again, memory failure. Verse 42. They remembered not his hand.
They forgot the power he displayed in the deliverance from Egypt. And so the psalmist, as if to say, you forgot, let me remind you, takes us back there again.
Segment 7. The plagues of Egypt recalled.
It's a catalog of judgment, a terrifying list.
It starts with turning their rivers to blood. The Nile was their lifeblood, their source of everything, and God turned it into a flowing curse.
Then the insect armies, diverse flies and frogs. Spurgeon has a great line on this. The tiniest plagues are the greatest.
Yeah.
You can fight a lion, you cannot fight a billion gnats. They get everywhere. There's no defense.
Then the agricultural destruction. Caterpillar and locust, hail destroying the vines, frost killing the sycamore trees.
The source material makes an interesting distinction here. It says the vines were for the rich, the luxury item, and the sycamores were for the poor. The fruit was a staple of their diet.
So the judgment struck all classes. No one was exempt, from the richest to the poorest.
That's right. And then their cattle given up to hot thunderbolts.
And then we get to verse 49. This one always stands out to me, and it's a bit controversial. By sending evil angels among them.
This has been a subject of a lot of debate in theology. What are these evil angels?
Yeah, are they demons? Is God deploying demons to do his work? Or are they good angels doing a tough job, an evil job from the Egyptian perspective?
The source material offers a few options. 1, the plagues themselves are the messengers or angels. They are the agents of wrath. 2, they are actual evil spirits, demons, used by God, using the executioner, so to speak.
And the third option?
That they are good angels performing a work that is evil or calamitous to the Egyptians, carrying out a harsh judgment.
Which view does the Reformed perspective tend to lean toward?
The synthesis is simply God's absolute sovereignty over all agents, good or evil. Whether they are demons or holy angels, they are instruments in his hand to execute the fierceness of his anger. The point is, he sends them. They do not go without his command.
He is in control of everything.
Everything. And the final blow, of course, was the death of the firstborn, smiting the chief of their strength in the tabernacles of Ham.
Verse 50 says, God made a way, or cleared a path, for his anger. He didn't spare their soul from death.
So we have this dark, devastating picture of Egypt being utterly crushed. But then in segment 8, the tone shifts completely on a dime.
Verse 52, but made his own people to go forth like sheep.
The contrast is so stark. The wolves are slain in heaps behind them, but the sheep are carefully gathered and led out.
Guided them in the wilderness like a flock. It brings to mind a shepherd leading his flock through a dangerous canyon, but they are safe with him.
And he brought them all the way to the border of his sanctuary, to the mountain which his right hand had purchased. And verse 55 describes the conquest. He cast out the heathen also before them.
The text says the land ate up its inhabitants because of their vice.
Yes, the Canaanites were ripe for judgment. Their iniquity was full, And Israel entered a furnished house. They didn't have to build the wells. They didn't have to plant the vineyards. They inherited it all.
So you would think, okay, now we're in the promised land. Now we have the vineyards and the wells. Now we will be faithful.
But human nature doesn't change just because your geography changes. Which brings us to segment 9, the failure of Shiloh.
Verse 56, yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God and kept not his testimonies. It's the same story all over again.
And here we come back to that metaphor we teased earlier, the deceitful bow. Verse 57, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow.
Explain that to us again. What is a deceitful bow?
In that time, a bow was a carefully constructed weapon. The wood had to be just right, seasoned correctly. But if it was warped, or if the wood was flawed, when the archer pulled back the string, the bow itself might twist.
So you aim right at the center of the target, you pull back, and the bow twists in your hand at the last second.
And the arrow goes wide. Or maybe the bow even snaps and hurts the archer. It's a metaphor for the unfaithful heart. God aims us at his glory. He puts us into a position to act. He pulls the string, and we twist. We fail to hit the mark.
That is a powerful image. We are the weapon in God's hand, but we are warped. We are unreliable.
And because of this warping, what do? They turn to idolatry, high places, graven images. And verse 58 says God heard this and was wroth and greatly abhorred Israel.
And this leads directly to the fall of Shiloh, verse 60, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among men.
This is a terrifying warning for the church today. Shiloh was the place where the Ark of the Covenant stayed for hundreds of years. It was the center of Israel's worship. But God is not tied to a building or a location.
Spurgeon's line is, a visible church can become a visible curse.
Exactly. If the heart is gone, if the faithfulness is gone, God removes the candlestick, and that's what happened. The ark was captured by the Philistines. Verse 61 says, he delivered his strength into captivity and his glory into the enemy's hand.
Can you imagine the horror of that day? The priests, Hophni and Phinehas, were killed in the battle. The ark of God was gone. And verse 64 has this chilling detail. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation.
The misery was so deep that natural personal grief was completely swallowed up by the national catastrophe. We know the story of Phinehas' wife. She hears the news, goes into labor, and dies giving birth. And she names the child Ichabod. The glory is departed.
She didn't even weep for her husband, because the national calamity of losing God's manifest presence was so much heavier.
It seems like the end of the story.
Yeah.
Israel has failed. The leadership is corrupt. The ark is gone. The priests are dead. The glory has departed.
But in the Psalms and in the Reformed faith, man's failure is never the end of the story.
Never. It is merely the backdrop for God's sovereignty to shine even brighter. And that's segment 10, the sovereign election of Judah.
Verse 65 contains one of the boldest, most anthropomorphic metaphors in the entire Bible. Then the Lord awakened as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that shouteth by reason of wine.
It is incredibly bold. It's this picture of a great warrior who has been sleeping, perhaps off a heavy drink, and he wakes up with a sudden shout of energy and fury. It signifies God rousing himself to decisive action.
And he smites his enemies. The Philistines who captured the ark get hit with, well, the King James says, in the hinder parts.
Yes, the emerods or tumors. It was a humiliating, perpetual reproach, a reminder never to mess with the God of Israel.
But then the real choice happens, verse 67. Moreover, he refused the tabernacle of Joseph and chose not the tribe of Ephraim.
This is the pivot point of history in the psalm. Ephraim, the armed tribe, the wealthy tribe, the ruling tribe, is officially and finally set aside.
And who does he choose instead? Verse 68, but chose the tribe of Judah, the Mount Zion, which he loved.
Notice the lack of reason given in the text other than God's love. He didn't choose Judah because Judah was morally superior. We've just spent 60 verses seeing that the whole nation had rebelled.
So it wasn't about their merit.
It was about his sovereign pleasure. It was election. He chose Zion because he loved it. Full stop.
And he didn't just choose a place, he chose a man. Verse 70. He chose David, also his servant.
And look where he took him from. And took him from the sheepfolds.
He wasn't in the palace. He wasn't training in the military academy. He was out in the fields, following the ewes great with young.
Spurgeon points out the beautiful typology here. The art of feeding cattle and the art of ruling men are sisters. David learned how to gently care for the flock, how to protect them from lions and bears, and that was the training ground that prepared him to feed Jacob, God's people.
And the psalm ends with such a beautiful description of ideal leadership. Verse 72. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands.
Integrity of heart and skillfulness of hands, character and competence. It's the perfect combination for a leader.
And ultimately, as Christians reading this, we see this pointing beyond David, don't we?
We must.
Yeah.
David was a great king, but he wasn't a perfect king. He had his own deceitful bow moments later in his life. This psalm ends with the reign of the Lord's anointed, but it points us ultimately to the true Son of David, the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ.
He is the one who truly feeds his people with perfect integrity and guides them with nail-pierced hands.
That's right. He's the faithful king that David could only foreshadow.
So after all that, what does this all mean for us today? We've walked through the history, we've seen the miracles, the rebellion, the judgment, and the election.
It brings us right back to the beginning, to the idea of the parable. This isn't just about ancient Israel. It is a mirror for the human heart.
It's a warning against forgetting.
It is. We are so prone to forget the hand of God. We get comfortable. We get our meat, our answered prayers, our blessings, and we forget the giver.
And it is also a comfort, because even when Ephraim turns back, God has a plan for Judah. Even when Shiloh falls, God chooses Zion.
God's ultimate purpose is not thwarted by human failure. That is the bedrock of Reformed thinking. He is sovereign over the rebellion, he is sovereign over the judgment, and he is sovereign over the restoration. His plan will not fail.
I want to leave our listener with a provocative thought today, something to chew on. We talked at length about the deceitful bow, the weapon that looks ready for battle but warps when you pull the string.
Yes. So consider this in your own life. In what ways are you, like Ephraim, fully armed? You have the knowledge. You have the theology. You have the podcasts, the books, the Bible on your phone. You are armed and carrying bows.
But are you turning back in the day of battle?
When temptation comes, when the pressure is on at work or at home, does your bow shoot straight? Or do you warp? Are you relying on the armor of your confession, on your knowledge of the catechism, or are you relying on the strength of the living God?
That is the question to mull over this week.
Indeed, it's a sobering one.
And one final practical takeaway from the beginning of the psalm. Teach this to your children. Don't hide the ugly parts of the story. Tell the generation to come the praises of the Lord, but also the failures of his people.
So that they might set their hope in God, not in history, not in themselves, but in the God of history.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Psalm 78.
It has been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep thinking.
And keep the faith.